Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today's story follows a copy center worker dealing with a last-minute customer who wanted professional business cards, refused to listen to how printing actually works, and would not take a hint. My shift ends at 10. Your poor planning is not my emergency. I work at a copy center. We print documents and photos. At 9:54 p.m., a guy came in to print business cards. First of all, why the F is he here 5 minutes before closing time? Second, he came in with something that can't be solved in 5 minutes because A, it's effing business cards, and B, he started asking a bunch of stupid follow-up questions, meaning he had no idea what he wanted. You're probably guessing that business cards are printed and sliced on a machine in large runs. We have a minimum of 50-plus pieces in our production facility, and that's not done in a regular office with a Xerox machine. Even if it isn't, that's fine, because you'll likely listen politely to my explanation, realize you won't get the results you want now, and go home afterwards. He didn't go home, but continued to ask if it was possible to print on a regular sheet of paper right now. I, knowing the tricks of Xerox, said that no, double-sided printing of business cards will not work. It prints with a shift of a few millimeters, and if you adjust the layout of business cards to this shift, you'd just be effing tired of moving this crap by millimeter on the screen, but the result will not be achieved, and the color will definitely not be the same. He continued to insist that he needed these stupid business cards and asked how long it would take me to adjust this layout, to which he received a direct answer, "None. I will not be doing it, especially now." But even after that, he didn't calm down and asked to make him at least one-sided. To make him finally go away, I even printed him a couple of sheets of his business cards on plain paper. I'll clarify. I don't mind getting into a person's situation if they urgently need to do something, to help them even if my working hours are over. But this one came with a blissful smile and a pile of questions, not giving a F about the fact that it's not my working hours. What killed me was when he started asking irrelevant questions like, "Where do you go to college?" Again, nothing wrong with small talk, but not at 10 p.m. I realize he's a total jerk, and at this pace he's going to sit here until he's tongue-tied or ends up starting to hit on me. I asked him if he would take these papers, which he didn't like the color of course, and he said no, so I pointed him to the door with a straight hand and said goodbye. Edit. I wanted to add one clarification. The client was out the door at 10:03 p.m., after my shift was over. Fair enough. If you think that service workers should be overworked for free because of your poor time management, go touch grass. The world doesn't revolve around you. Good customer service doesn't mean you have to exploit yourself. First, it's only 5 minutes, then the next Karen comes with, "But my sister came here 5 minutes later and it was fine." And our second story. Found one at the grocery store, but the cashier bit back. So I'm a vendor that services a lot of grocery stores, but until today hadn't really come across a good one until today. At a grocery store in the morning, fairly slow, 1 lane open plus 4 self-checkout lines, middle-aged couple comes up huffing and puffing that there's someone in line in front of them that's loading things onto the belt and being checked out, and it's ridiculous that there aren't more lines open. Cashier says they can use self-checkout. Husband says that he shouldn't have to do her job for her. Apparently 10 seconds is all he can take because he just mutters fine and walks over to self-checkout. First item he scans at self-checkout needs cashier approval, so the poor girl running the area comes over to fix it, and he lays into her about how terrible the service is and how offended he is that he has to wait. While the cashier's trying to fix the item scan, customer looks over and sees the cashier manager showing another employee how to do something at the customer service desk. Cue a nice entitled "excuse me" while looking at her. She has no idea what's going on, so asks how she can help. He berates her for having a personal conversation and she needs to open a lane for him right now since she's on the clock and he has places to be that are far more important than her conversation. She gives the biggest eye roll I've ever seen and says, "Okay, go to register 2, I'll be there in a second." He drags his wife to register 2 and starts unloading groceries. Cashier manager gets there and starts ringing him up. He asked her something, but I didn't hear what, and she said, "Sorry, I can't go check that. Will take time, and you have places to be." That apparently broke his brain because he just looked at his wife and said, "You handle this," and walked out of the store. Then the wife has the audacity to look at the cashier and say, "Can I break this into multiple transactions?" Cashier looked at her and said, "Sorry, I have places to be," and opened it, try to help out so you can get one transaction with me, or you're welcome to go back into the other line that's open. Wife just hung her head and said, "Just check me out." I saw the husband talking to the manager in the entryway, so made sure to grab him on his way in and tell him the cashiers did everything right and the guy was a jerk. Manager just said, "Yeah, I could tell," 3 words into the conversation. He just didn't want to be happy. Some people. And our last story. You assumed a private landowner would stop using his land because you built houses nearby. The HOA never should have brought the case. I've owned the same farm for most of my life. Not a cute hobby farm with 2 goats and an Instagram page, an honest-to-God working place with equipment, pasture, woods, fields, and a stretch of hillside that most people would call unusable. That hillside's the reason this whole mess happened. It runs along the edge of my property, steep enough that you don't plant crops there, and littered with big and medium boulders that have been sitting there since the last ice age. Beautiful, in a rugged way. Also useless, unless you're the kind of family that thinks dirt bikes are therapy. I've got 5 sons. Between them, I've got more grandkids than I can count without taking my boots off. When they were young, they'd ride anything with wheels. Bicycles, old ATVs, mini bikes, you name it. When the older ones hit their teens, it turned into motocross bikes, and pretty soon that rocky hillside became their favorite spot. At first, it was just them riding around trying not to break ankles on loose stone. Then my oldest son, Luke, stood on the porch one day watching them pick their way between boulders and said, "Dad, we could make something real out of that slope." I had a dozer, I had an excavator, I had a skid steer. When you run a farm, you don't rent equipment every time you need to move dirt, you own it. So we did what rural families do when they want to fix something. We built it ourselves. We started carving a trail, then a berm, then a few jumps. We moved rocks to the sides, used some as barriers, packed the dirt properly, and shaped turns. The grandkids helped mostly by getting in the way and then proudly telling their parents they built the track. Within a year, it wasn't just a track, it was a track. You could run a full lap. It had rhythm sections, a couple safer tabletops, and a beginner line around the bigger stuff. We put up a simple sign at the entrance, "Private property, no trespassing, permission required," and installed a gate because that's what any sane landowner does once you build something that looks fun. For a long time, it was just family and a few friends. Then the grandkids started bringing more friends. Then the sun started improving it every spring. Then someone suggested hosting a small charity ride day. Then another person asked, "Would you ever do a local race?" I'm not stupid. Anything with engines and speed carries risks, so when it started turning into maybe this could be a real thing, we did it properly. We talked to the county about what we needed. We got a business license for events. We carried liability insurance. We required waivers. We put rules in writing. We limited hours and days. No riding early mornings, no riding past dusk, and nothing on Sundays because half my family still treats Sunday like it's sacred. And we didn't run it every day. It was scheduled, mostly weekends, a few weekdays in summer, and maybe 2 or 3 organized events a year. It grew into a small side business, not buy a yacht money, more like pay for maintenance, keep the kids busy, and maybe upgrade the equipment money. Plus, the local community liked having something to do that wasn't sitting in a parking lot drinking cheap beer. That went on for 10 years. Then the development showed up. At first, it was just survey stakes and bulldozers on the neighboring land, then roads, then foundations, then rows of houses. And I remember saying to Luke, "They're building awful close." Luke shrugged, "Not our land, we've been here forever." That's true, we've been here forever, and our track had been operating for a decade at that point. Anyone with eyes could see it from the hill. Anyone buying land next door could hear it on a Saturday. They didn't just suddenly discover we existed. The developers worked on that neighborhood for years. So when families started moving in and the HOA formed, I assumed it would be the usual. A few people who complain about fences and mailbox colors. I was wrong. The first complaint came in a nice envelope. "Hello, we represent the Meadow Ridge HOA. Some residents have concerns about the noise from the motocross activity adjacent to the neighborhood. We'd like to discuss possible solutions." I'm an old farmer, not a monster. I called the number and agreed to meet. 2 weeks later, 3 HOA board members walked up my driveway like they owned it. There was a guy in a polo who looked like he'd never held a shovel in his life, and 2 women with clipboards and matching concerned expressions. Polo guy stuck out his hand. "I'm Brent, HOA president. We're hoping you'll be reasonable." I shook his hand. I'm always reasonable, as long as people are respectful. One of the women glanced past me toward the hillside and winced as if the memory of engine noise hurt her. Brent said, "So, we have small children, families, people work from home. This track it's a disturbance." Luke, who'd come out to stand beside me, said calmly, "We operate limited hours, mostly weekends. It was here long before your houses." The second woman clicked her pen like it was a weapon. "That doesn't matter. The area is residential now." I couldn't help myself. My farm isn't the area. My farm is my farm. Brent smiled like he was talking to a stubborn toddler. "We're not trying to take anything from you. We just need to protect property values." Luke said, "What are you asking for?" Brent's smile widened. "Ideally, shut it down." I stared at him. "You drove up here to ask me to shut down something my family built 10 years ago because you chose to build houses next to it." The woman with the pen said, "Not chose. People deserve peace." Luke said, "We can talk about adding more berms and trees, maybe sound barriers in certain spots." Brent waved it off. "No, that's not enough. We need certainty." That's when I understood. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to pressure. I told them we're not shutting down, but we're willing to be good neighbors. We can look at adjustments. Brent's eyes got colder. "If you refuse, we'll take action." "Do what you have to do," I said, and went back to feeding cattle. For a month, the letters came, then the emails, then the threats of calling the county, then the "we have an attorney." We kept doing what we'd always done, same schedule, same rules. And then the sabotage started. The first time a grandkid came running up, helmet still on, breathing hard. "Grandpa, there's nails on the track." I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't. Someone had thrown roofing nails across the entrance of a turn, shiny, scattered, ready to shred tires, or worse. Luke picked one up with gloves and held it in his palm. "This isn't an accident," he said, voice tight. "We shut down riding that day. We walked the entire track. We found more nails in 2 other places." Luke muttered, "They're trying to hurt someone." I called the sheriff. A deputy came out, took photos, and asked, "Any suspects?" I pointed toward the new neighborhood. "The HOA's been threatening us." The deputy nodded like he'd already guessed. "Install cameras." So we did. The next attempt was worse. Someone tried to wedge a chunk of broken concrete near the landing of a jump, half buried in dirt. Not visible unless you knew exactly where to look. If a rider hit that at speed, it could have killed them. That night, Luke didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with coffee and stared at the camera feeds like he was guarding Fort Knox. 3 days later, at 2:17 a.m., the cameras caught a man climbing the gate with a backpack. He wasn't a teenager, he was a grown adult. The footage was clear enough to show his face when he turned toward the camera because apparently he wasn't smart. He walked onto the track, bent over, and started scattering something out of his bag. Roofing nails. Luke took the video to the sheriff. The sheriff took it seriously. The guy turned out to be a homeowner in the HOA. He was charged, trespassing, criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, whatever the county prosecutor felt confident about based on evidence. And when the HOA heard about it, they didn't apologize, they sued. The complaint was a thick stack of paper delivered by someone who looked too polished to be standing in my dusty driveway. The HOA alleged nuisance, excessive noise, safety concerns, changing character of the area, and a bunch of other phrases that basically meant, "We don't like your thing, so stop." They hired a big city attorney, the kind of lawyer whose suit probably cost more than my first tractor. Brent showed up at my gate one afternoon like he was doing me a favor. "You can still avoid court," he said, "just agree to cease operations." I asked, "How much did you pay that lawyer?" Brent's smile twitched. "That's irrelevant." "It's relevant to me," I said, "because it tells me how hard you're willing to burn your own residents' money just to control my land." Brent leaned forward. "You don't understand. We have families, little kids. It's unsafe." Luke stepped up behind me. "Unsafe? The only thing that's happened is one of your residents sneaking onto private property at night with nails." Brent's face went red. "That was an individual, not the HOA. I said, "Then maybe you should focus on controlling your individuals instead of trying to control my farm." He left, furious. We hired our own attorney, local, sharp, very familiar with rural land issues. She didn't wear a fancy suit. She wore a folder full of receipts and facts. Her first question was simple. How long have you operated? 10 years, I said. In the neighborhood? New, Luke answered. Last few years. She nodded. Good, that matters. The HOA's lawsuit tried to make it sound like we were some reckless operation that popped up overnight, but we had records, permits for events, insurance, schedules, written rules, waivers, and even emails showing we'd tried to discuss reasonable adjustments. And we had something else, the concept that makes people like Brent furious. We were there first. Court day came, and I'll admit, walking into that courthouse felt strange. I'm used to barns and fields, not polished hallways and quiet seriousness. The HOA's lawyer stood up, looking confident and expensive. Brent sat behind him with that smug, we're gonna win posture. Their lawyer painted a picture. Children unable to nap, parents unable to work, family suffering, property values dropping, and an unregulated motocross facility operating adjacent to a residential community. Our attorney stood up and said something that made the judge's eyebrows lift. Your Honor, this track is on private agricultural land built and used by the family for years before the HOA existed. The HOA moved next to it and is now attempting to eliminate a pre-existing lawful use of property. The judge asked the HOA lawyer, was the track in operation prior to the development? The HOA lawyer tried to dodge. The area has changed. The judge cut him off. That's not my question. Was it in operation? Brent's lawyer hesitated. Yes, Your Honor, but the judge held up a hand. Thank you. Then came the evidence. Our attorney presented dated photos of the track from years ago, not staged pictures, family photos with grandkids on little bikes, time-stamped on old phones. She showed business filings and insurance documents. She showed the written schedule. She showed the emails where we offered mitigations. Then she played the camera footage of the man sneaking onto the track at 2:17 a.m. The courtroom got very quiet. The judge looked straight at Brent. Is that one of your residents? Brent shifted. I believe so, yes, but the judge's voice turned icy. Your association is arguing safety and community welfare while a resident is caught placing nails on the track? That undermines your credibility. The HOA lawyer tried to recover, calling residents to testify about noise. One woman said, my baby can't sleep. The judge asked, did you know about the track when you moved in? She hesitated. Well, we heard it a few times. The judge pressed. Did you ask about it before purchasing? She looked down. No. Another resident said, we thought it would stop once the neighborhood was finished. The judge leaned back. You assumed a private landowner would stop using his land because you built houses nearby. Their expensive lawyer tried to argue that the track had become commercial and that changed everything. Our attorney responded calmly. The track holds a few events a year, permitted and insured. It's not operating daily, it's not open 24/7, and it does not violate any county noise ordinance. If the HOA believes the county laws should change, they can petition the county, but they can't use civil court to erase a pre-existing lawful use simply because they don't like it. The judge asked the HOA lawyer, do you have any evidence of an ordinance violation? Decibel readings, citations? The lawyer admitted they did not. Then the judge asked our attorney, are you willing to continue reasonable mitigations? She looked at me. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor, she said. They've already limited hours, limited event days, and added barriers. They're willing to plant additional trees and post clearer signage. That's what sealed it. The judge ruled in our favor. Not with a dramatic slam of a gavel, but with something worse for Brent. A calm, rational statement that made it clear the HOA never should have brought the case. He said the track was a lawful pre-existing use, that the HOA had not proven a legal nuisance under the standards required, and that moving next to an existing activity does not give you the right to force it to stop, especially when the operator is compliant with permits and local regulations. He also issued an order prohibiting the HOA and its agents from entering our property or interfering with operations. And then my favorite part, he warned that future frivolous actions could result in fees and sanctions. Brent's face looked like someone had served him a plate of dirt. Outside the courthouse, Brent marched up to me. This isn't over, he snapped. I looked him dead in the eye and said, it actually is. That's what a judge does. He ends things. Luke added pleasantly, also, we've got cameras, so tell your residents to keep their nails at Home Depot. Brent spun around and stormed off toward his lawyer, who suddenly looked less expensive and more tired. We went home and did what we always do after a hard day. We worked. A few weeks later, we planted a line of trees along the property edge. We added another berm, not because the HOA deserved it, but because we're not trying to be jerks. We're trying to ride bikes and run a farm. And the best part? After the court case, the complaints stopped. Turns out when people realize they can't bully an old farmer out of his own land, they suddenly discover the magic power of closing their windows. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.